Hello, everybody. It's Father Bob Gross. Good afternoon. I hope you're doing well. It is Saturday, December 17th, a little bit before 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. We had a little bit of a snowstorm, and now it quit snowing. Now it's starting to blow a little bit. Tonight it's going to be really cold, so be prudent and careful. We are going to have all four masses this weekend in our four parishes, but be prudent. Tomorrow's going to be really cold, so be careful out there. Here's the homily for the fourth Sunday of Advent. I want to give the homily before the weekend masses, just so I don't forget. Today's gospel comes from the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew and the account of how Jesus came to be born. If you want to put it this way, it's from Joseph's perspective, as earlier in the week we heard it from Mary's perspective on the Immaculate Conception on that feast day. So here's the homily. Joseph, her husband, since he was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame. Matthew 1, verse 19. This year has been a significant one, and one that I will remember for the rest of my life. In September of this year, my dad died, and with that, a major change happened in my life. A shift occurred. The change can be experienced in many ways, but this last Thanksgiving was one that I experienced very acutely, a moment of life after Dad. This Thanksgiving, my nephew and niece brought their respective girlfriend and boyfriend to my sister's home for the first time at a family gathering and at a family holiday. At that moment, I could feel the shift happening in life. We commended Dad to the Lord, and now life is moving on. That would be the way He wanted it. Life is moving on by my nephew and niece bringing their potential spouses to our family gathering. It made me realize again the complexity of dating, the awkwardness of it all. In dating, there are two sides of every relationship, and it was amusing to watch my nephew and niece negotiate those realities. This last month, we have had the same two dynamics emerge for Advent. First, there is something new happening. In the Scriptures and in the season of Advent, there is the passing of ages, the passing from promise to fulfillment. God has always promised a Savior from the house of David, and He continually promised that through His prophets. With Advent, we see the passing of the old into the newness of what God is doing. We see that in the birth and the preaching of John the Baptist, who prepared the way of the Lord. The second dynamic we see in the season of Advent is the two sides of a love story between Mary and Joseph. Earlier in the month, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, we see Mary's side of the story when the Archangel Gabriel addressed her as full of grace and asked her to be the mother of the Son of God, a son who would be of David's lineage and house. So for Jesus to be of David's house, He needed to be in the house of David. That's why Joseph comes into the picture. Today's gospel is about Joseph's experience of the newness of God coming to the world in the incarnation of God's only Son, Jesus. For Jesus to be welcomed and believed and cared for, He truly needed the two most faithful and loving people to be His parents. That's who Mary and Joseph were. We see that most beautifully as we hear St. Matthew describe Joseph. Since Joseph was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame. I think we hear the story so much, we don't realize just how profound a description that Matthew gives to Joseph. When Matthew describes Joseph as righteous, he is saying that Joseph is a faithful follower of the law of God. He always does the right thing because he loves God. He is full of faith and devotion to the goodness of the law. Joseph is no bum. He is one who has the dignity of being one of God's chosen ones. For Joseph, God is first, family is second, and love pervades all that he does. He is in right relationship with God. But then Matthew makes this statement: Joseph was unwilling to expose her to shame. Because of the public optics, it looks like Mary was unfaithful to Joseph. She was pregnant. That knowledge must have hurt Joseph very deeply. It led him to confusion. He could have publicly humiliated Mary and had her stoned. But here we see the real aspect of Joseph's righteousness. We see his gentleness. He is not harsh. He wants to end the relationship before it goes too far, but he doesn't want to destroy Mary. He is merciful. He is just and merciful in a very complicated matter. A different path than destroying someone's relationship and reputation on Facebook or social media. The way Joseph handles this must have been the test that God put Joseph through to see if he truly was the one. He was the one, as we hear the angel appear to Joseph in a dream. Unlike the infidelity of David, his ancestor, and Solomon, who even though he was wise, fell into sin. Unlike the many descendants of David who were unfaithful to the Lord and his covenant, Joseph, the descendant of David, is King David's greatest descendant. He embodies all that David was supposed to be: humble and obedient, just and gentle. That's what makes Joseph so important. And that's why God the Father chose Joseph. God the Father gave his son to a woman full of faith and trust for a mother. He gave his son to a man who was full of righteousness and mercy to be his earthly father. Wow, what wisdom. You need both. Jesus needed a mother and an earthly father like every child does. This portrait of St. Joseph the week before Christmas shines on the church, and it is a call to the men of the church. It is a call to true masculinity that is so lacking in our world. As Jesus needed both a mother and an earthly father to flourish, the church today needs men to be active in their faith. The church needs men who do the right thing always and also show the strong gentleness that is needed in family life. There's such a temptation that men face. They face the temptation of false masculinity. In Spanish, we call it machismo. It's that hyper-toughness that exalts the false virtues of self-reliance. A toughness that allows no tenderness. A brushing off of responsibility when it comes to practicing the faith. A false masculinity that says that mothers are the religious ones, so they're the ones who raise the children in the faith. First communion and confirmation are the only two command performances. It is the false masculinity that sees faith as a weakness, that sees virtue in being more powerful than others. It is the false virtue of trying to be better than others instead of being neighbors to each other. It's the false virtue that says in order to be a man, you have to have a little vice, a little porn here, a little drinking there. And my wife has to put up with it. Today in St. Joseph, we see true masculinity. We see true manhood. When Christian men live lives of righteousness and gentleness, we see the different but essential gifts that mothers give to their children, and the essential gifts that only men who practice their faith can give their children. Without Joseph, what would have happened to Mary? She would have never made it to Bethlehem. She would have never made it out of Israel when Herod was trying to destroy Jesus. She would have been an abandoned mother with no one to help bring into the world the Son of God. Mary needed Joseph. Our Mother Church needs Christian men to live righteousness and gentleness, to protect the church from evil and corruption. Whenever I read the story of St. Joseph, I want to be a better man. Just look at what was at stake for Joseph to be just and gentle, to be a real man. It took Joseph to do the right thing and to protect the two most precious gifts the world has ever received from God, Mary the Immaculate and Jesus the Son of God. Let's do our part in the common good of salvation. If we are women, let us imitate Mary's trust and faith. If we are men, let us imitate Joseph's righteousness and gentleness, so we can prepare the world for the coming again of Jesus in our hearts and in our world, in our families, as Christmas approaches. Saint Joseph, pray for us. Pray for us. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a good weekend. Stay warm, be safe, and may God bless you.